Today on CNS, our reporters leave the halls of Northgate for exotic locations. First, Karen Goldman takes us to Felton, California. Next, Lucy Schwartz reports from Linton, North Dakota. And Jill Replogle brings a story back from Guatemala. 3 places, 3 stories, all shot at different latitudes. This is Felton, California. The community here has come together to buy back their water utility from a German company. All over the world, companies are buying up water and selling it for profit. The question here is whether water should be a human right or a commodity sold on the open market. Karen Goldman gets some answers.
Water flows freely down the creeks around Felton, a small town in the Santa Cruz Mountains. The water supplies about 1,300 homes, yet the water is privately owned by a company over 5,000 miles away. It's been privately owned since the 1890s, but the owners were first a local family, then an American company. 5 years ago, the water utility was bought by a German company, RWE. That's when prices skyrocketed. Connie Barr is retired and lives in Felton. She loves to garden, but she says high water rates are making it tough.
Cal-Am came forward with a huge, like a 50% price increase. 50% increases captures your attention, whether it's milk or eggs or butter or water.
Cal-Am is one of 32 companies in the United States owned by American Water Works, a subsidiary of that German multinational, RWE. American Water owns the water that supplies more than 16.2 million customers nationwide. And owning the water in Felton means not only the pipelines and the treatment facility, but also 200 acres of land surrounding the creek. When Felton residents saw their water bills go up, they formed a group called Friends of Locally Owned Water, or FLOW, to protest. Connie helped organize FLOW.
When I moved into this house, water ran between $38 and $50 every billing period, which was every 2 months. And when it went up to about 60, and then it went to 70, started noticing, and it was a little irritating. At the present time, it will go between 100 and 200.
High costs were one of many reasons that Jim Mosher decided to volunteer as a legal consultant to FLOW. He's lived in Felton for 18 years and says that protesting private multinational ownership of water is close to his heart.
The water that I drink flows down the hillside behind my house, and we're paying among the highest rates for water in the entire state of California. For our elders who are on fixed incomes and for the low-income folks in our communities, people are having to start choosing between, taking baths and having a garden and having food on their table. So the rates are really, really important.
The State Public Utilities Commission determines how much the ratepayers pay private companies for water. The ratepayers are the customers.
At the Public Utilities Commission, we have an entire division here, the Division of Ratepayer Advocates, whose sole focus is to advocate on consumers' behalf in rate proceedings here. And I think everybody in this agency, the Public Utilities Commission, believes that they are a ratepayer advocate as well.
Our experience with the PUC has been, it's just been horrible. They're completely captive of the corporations. We have, to get any access at the PUC is extremely expensive, and the majority of the commissioners are in the pockets of the companies they're supposed to regulate, and we've gotten absolutely no satisfaction from them.
And Felton's residents also complain that under RWE's stewardship, the water system is in disrepair and service is almost non-existent.
On my road right here, we had a pipe breakage. We had water barreling down this rural mountain forested road for, I don't know, I think it was probably 8-12 hours. I mean, this was a lot of water before anybody came up and did anything about it. And we were calling, but we're reaching their call center in Illinois, Ohio, and certainly the people on the other end of the line don't have a clue what we're talking about.
But there are other concerns beyond poor service and high rates.
For me, that's secondary to the issues of the preservation and protection of the watershed. Cal-Am has no interest. They don't cooperate with other water districts in the area. They make no effort to protect the watershed. They don't care. So that, to me, is the most critical issue.
California American Water declined to be interviewed. But the San Jose Mercury newspaper quoted California American Water as saying that Felton's fears about poor service, skyrocketing rates, and even the bottling of their precious local resource are ungrounded and misinformed. The Wall Street Journal quotes RWE's chief executive as saying that 90% of its U.S. customers are satisfied with the quality of service, and he calls Felton an exception. Germany's RWE is the third largest water utility operating around the world, and California American Water is the fourth largest private water utility in California. Over the last 18 years, multinationals like Bechtel and Nestle have been buying up water utilities and water sources all over the world. And communities have protested from Cochabamba, Bolivia, to Johannesburg, South Africa, to Stockton, California. In the case of Felton, 6 years of protests have led to expensive legal battles with California American Water and the PUC.
These are for-profit companies, so they have an incentive to invest in the system, because if they don't do a good job, if they don't meet the needs of the ratepayers, those ratepayers can turn around and actually take over their water system in an eminent domain type proceeding.
And this is exactly what is happening in Felton. In 2003, Flo tried to purchase the water utility to bring it back to local ownership. 75% of Felton voters approved an $11 million bond issue, but RWE said the utility is not for sale and claimed it's worth $28 million. Flo's only option was to get the local government to exercise eminent domain to take over the water supply. The case is now in court.
The tactic is to make it as expensive and as hard for us as possible so that nobody else will follow our example. That's the tactic, and it's disgraceful. As a company that is supposed to be protecting the public's interest through the ownership and operation of a water system, it's an outrage that they are operating in this way in this little valley.
Flo and their supporters in Felton are left waiting, and in June, a jury will decide whether the water system will return to local hands. Members of Flo and other Felton residents are still bewildered as to why Cal-Am cares so much about holding on to the small town of Felton.
Why wouldn't they just let us go? And we've been told over and over by people from Cal-Am, you're a domino. If we let you go, then every other community will want to do the same.
Flo's members hope Felton's example will prompt people to take action nationally and globally.
To me, it is drawing the line in the sand and saying this move toward privatization of public assets by giant multinational corporations stops right here. It is not moving over this line to water. That's it. Water stays public. It's in the public domain. That's where it belongs. It's a human right.
And Felton is not alone. In 1/3 of the 32 places where American Water owns water utilities, citizens are also trying to get back the ownership of one of the world's most precious resources.
Next, we take you to North Dakota. Lucy Schwartz tells the story of two brothers who, against all odds, have dedicated the last 30 years to saving a piece of Native American history from extinction.
After a while, it becomes a life's mission, even though that's not really what you intended to do. You know, we were just looking for a horse that would last, but it turned into something totally different.
Every day for the past 30 years, Leo Kuntz and his brother Frank have fought to keep the tradition of these horses alive.
We just can't continue to throw things away all the time. Just destroy it or let it be destroyed.
The brothers believe these horses, called Nakota, are the last living link to the Sioux's prized war ponies. Frank and Leo are not wealthy men pursuing a hobby, but two brothers who survived the war in Vietnam, who carry a deep respect for the rich Native American traditions of their homeland.
You can trace Sitting Bull's herd right back to this part of Dakota.
The brothers choose to live hand to mouth so they can provide a living for their horses.
I don't mind this job feeding them.
Frank and Leo get up at dawn every day to feed hundreds of horses on these rugged pastures in Linton, North Dakota. If the horses were people, they would make up nearly half of the entire population of this prairie town of 1,400.
The Kuntz brothers claim the Nakota horse is native to the North Dakota Badlands. There are about 1,000 left in the world, and 600 of them are right here in Linton.
In 1971, the Kuntz brothers returned to their family ranch in North Dakota after one tour in Vietnam. They were interested in breeding racehorses until they stumbled on the Nakota at nearby Theodore Roosevelt National Park. The brothers bought their first Nakota from the park for $170. The remaining horses were sold for slaughter. The horses from the park were sturdy and intelligent. Frank and Leo were quickly smitten, so they kept coming back to the park for more.
They're all different, just like people, like your children, very much so, yeah. And you start looking at it that way, you know what I mean, like your family, you know.
They're some of the smartest, kindest, trusting horses I've worked around and been around. It was their bone and their brains. And you know, that really piqued our interest more than anything.
The brothers collected literature and documents, including DNA tests, and a 3-year historical study conducted at Harvard University. They concluded the horses descend from Sitting Bull's herd of war ponies. Horse culture was especially important to the tribes of the Dakotas, one of the last areas in the country settled by white men.
We were afraid to tell the national park what we thought was possible or what, you know, evidence was showing us, because we were kind of afraid they were going to take them away from us.
But the park had no interest in preserving the Nakota. It continued to crossbreed the remaining horses so that today no pure Nakotas roam the national park.
We don't really call our horses Nakota horses very often. These are more or less a historic exhibit that we maintain so that visitors can have a sense of what it was like when there were wild horses running free here in the times of Theodore Roosevelt.
As a result, the herd has totally changed.
Even their social structures changed, their language. They've lost things out there that I don't know that they'll ever get back. I would really like to see the older line horses reintroduced into the national park. It should have been the national park's job, if you ask me, you know.
In 1991, the Kuntz brothers went straight to the state legislature and lobbied to get the Nakota named North Dakota State Horse. But instead, the brothers were mocked and told to quit horsing around.
These are horses that my grandpa, my dad, and my brothers took care of horses.
Like the brothers, Native American artist Butch Thunderhawk appreciates the importance of the Nakota. He grew up on the Standing Rock Reservation, where Sitting Bull spent his last days.
There's no understanding of those horses. If that horse disappeared, it's like part of my life, part of our life, part of our tradition, part of our culture disappeared with it.
Thunderhawk sees the brothers' fight as one small way to honor Indian heritage after centuries of discrimination against Native Americans.
When I went to Japan, I was treated better there than I was treated here in the United States.
Frank and Leo refused to let the issue die. They went back to the capital 2 years later, and in 1993, the Nakota became North Dakota's state horse. That was a small victory for two brothers facing another uphill battle. Frank and Leo both have prostate cancer. They receive veterans' disability checks each month to treat their cancers. But with that money as their only source of income, the brothers have chosen not to receive treatment and to guarantee a life for their horses instead. Frank and Leo spend about $500 a year on each of their 600 horses, and the stress of the mission has also cost Frank his family farm and created tension in the Kuntz family. The horses even cost Frank his first marriage.
It's split the family, it's brought them together, it's split the family, it's brought them together, it's split the family. My first wife, she could have cared less about these horses, but in fact she blamed a lot of the problems on the horses.
If the horses weren't there, it's like I think he would just shrivel up and die.
Fortunately for Frank, his second wife, Shelley, shares his dedication.
Part of what attracted me to him was that passion that he had, and you can just see it when he talks. He gets very animated and talks fast and loud and forcefully, you know, because he believes so much in these horses and their history and that they belong here.
Shelley gave up her full-time insurance job to lead the conservancy they founded to save the horses in 1999. She says it's been a labor of love and sacrifice.
We don't have a house, we don't have land, we don't have stuff, but, you know, in the end, you know, financial status, I guess, isn't everything.
Shelley, she asked me if I had to make a choice between the horses and her. I felt it was such an unfair question. I never answered the question, really, and she never asked it again, either.
But as the brothers' health declines, one main concern arises. Who will continue to fight for the Nakota?
Okay. I've always respected them a lot, both of them a lot. Every penny they get, they put into the horses.
8 years ago, 26-year-old Seth Ziegler stumbled upon Frank and Leo's website and chose to volunteer on the ranch instead of joining the Marines.
It's undeniable that there's something unique. They are living history, and that's better than any other kind of museum to me.
And Frank is grateful that the horses have romanced another younger soul to carry on his life mission.
I've always kind of said that I'd be there, so I don't know how it's going to play out. I don't know where I'm going to be. But if it came down to it, that it needed to, yeah, because it's something that I feel is kind of more important than what my personal life would be.
But for now, Frank and Leo aren't going anywhere.
I've been tempted to run off many times. I don't know what it is. It's the horses themselves. You know, when you work with them and stuff, you realize that they are really good horses structurally, mentally, and that they have a right to go on.
And now we take you to San Marcos La Laguna, a lakeside paradise in Guatemala. Once off the beaten track, a growing number of expats are buying up land and moving in. But while foreign dollars have created much-needed jobs, some locals are worried that they're selling off their future. Jill Rep Local reports.
Lake Atitlan is magic, the mirror of the sky. We have the presence of the old elders, the volcanoes, and the presence of Ish, the mountains. And here, spirituality is something special.
San Marcos está entre los 45 municipios de los 332 a nivel nacional. Estamos en extrema pobreza.
San Marcos, servidos.
I first came to San Marcos in 2001, and like most other visitors, I was smitten. But beneath the blissful surface, there seemed to be an apartheid-like separation between the impoverished Maya locals and the bosses and patrons of the booming tourism business. On later visits, the contrast seemed even more stark. I wondered how much the locals were really benefiting from tourism. I went back in April 2008 to find out. San Marcos is legendary in backpacking circles as a mecca for a certain kind of tourism. The Lonely Planet guidebook calls it something of a magnet for hippies with a purpose, who believe the place has a particular spiritual energy.
We're here in San Marcos, and full moon, new cycle beginning, and...
This all started about 20 years ago. Jesus Landa, who's from Guatemala City, was one of the first outsiders to settle in San Marcos. He and a few others bought land near the lake and set about crafting their own little paradise.
It was green, really green. Coffee trees, jocote trees, orange trees, and corn. No trails, no paths, no electricity, no shops, no stores, no noise, no neighbors. It was really peaceful, really peaceful.
The first meditation center was built in 1991. This set San Marcos off toward a future in spiritual tourism. Now you can get a massage, or become an astral voyager,
And if that's not enough, you can join up with the ecstatic dance circle in the afternoon. Then top off the day with a moonlit Mayan ceremony, led by a French Canadian. In 1996, peace accords ended a brutal 36-year war in Guatemala. In towns around the lake, dozens of people were killed or disappeared, mostly by the Guatemalan army. But San Marcos was lucky to escape most of the violence. Peacetime has opened Guatemala to tourism. Even tiny San Marcos, a pueblo of about 2,500 people, has, at last count, 13 hotels, 18 restaurants, and 9 therapy centers. And more tourists are putting down their backpacks, building homes, and starting businesses. Annika Borner came here 3 years ago from Germany. She said she didn't plan to peddle land, but thanks to her job in real estate, she's found a way to stay.
Real estate might not be a really spiritual thing, but it can be as well.
Before tourists came, the Kaqchikel Maya locals harvested fruits and vegetables and tended cattle here on communally owned land. Many migrated to the Pacific coast during harvest time to work under harsh conditions on large cotton and coffee plantations. Now the locals serve food, clean hotel rooms, and work construction for the foreigners. Many locals are grateful for the jobs tourism has brought.
Antes nosotros queríamos trabajar, queríamos hacer algo, pero no hay dónde. Porque yo no puedo ir a trabajar en la casa de la gente que son de aquí, porque no me pueden pagar.
Rebecca Kia-Cain is a receptionist at the San Marcos Holistic Center. She says tourism has also opened up a window to the modern world.
Gracias al turismo que ahora el internet está aquí. Cuando yo estudié, yo bien recuerdo, solo por una máquina de escribir, yo tenía que viajar a San Juan o a San Pedro la Laguna.
Still, nearly 3/4 of the town lives in poverty. And while some foreigners provide social services, tourism has brought new problems.
Hay quienes que han ayudado mucho a este pueblo, pero hay quienes en vez de ayudar ingresan drogas. Por cierto, ahora hasta niños venden drogas.
And they're using as well, not just an occasional joint, but harder drugs like crack and ecstasy are easy to find in towns around the lake. Drugs are cheap and policing is minimal. Theft has gone up too. Foreigners bring cameras, iPods, and laptops, things that are well beyond the reach of most locals' pocketbooks. A typical salary in the tourism industry, between $5 and $7 a day, barely buys breakfast in most of the town's restaurants. And foreigners are buying up land at a rate that alarms local authorities. Only 40% of the land in San Marcos is still owned by villagers. Pusul Mendoza says his generation will be hard hit.
Ahorita viven con sus papás, viven en familia, pero ya cuando tienen que ocuparse a sus propias familias van a tener problemas. Esta gente no vamos a tener dónde vivir.
But the need for instant cash often rules out financial planning.
And it might be someone in their family getting sick, or the family needs a little bit of money. Another baby was born, another mouth to feed, and so they will come and try to sell their land with me.
Kia-Cain said one of her brothers sold his inherited land for about $260. That was only 5 years ago, and now it's on the market for $10,000.
Entonces es algo muy loco, pero lo hizo.
Borner says she has no qualms about selling land here.
Why should I? I've struggled with the moral part of it in the beginning, because am I selling off San Marcos? Am I selling off the lake? Now, people come here anyway. With our dollar, with our euro, we can really raise their living standards. They get a better life. We have a beautiful place to live.
But Pusul Mendoza says life for the locals isn't as good as it should be.
Por lo mismo que nuestras riquezas está siendo aprovechado por los extranjeros. Porque nosotros muchas veces no sabemos invertir, no sabemos de explotar las potencialidades que tenemos acá.
Kia-Cain is worried about what her town will look like if people keep selling.
Si no pensamos bien, la gente extranjera es lo que van a estar llenado aquí en San Marcos la Laguna. Ya no va a existir ningún indígena. Entonces ahí perderíamos todo.
As it turns out, a few dozen outsiders own about 90% of the tourism businesses in San Marcos. But I did see signs that things might be changing. For the first time, I stayed in a hotel owned by locals. And a group of young people has started a guide business. The group's leader, Antonio Perez Sacach, showed me around town. He says tourism is the future.
Para mí es fuente de ingreso aquí en Guatemala, en nuestro municipio San Marcos también.
The guides are also helping promote local artisans and environmental projects.
Ese es el tour de aventurera que van a montaña.
Perez says it's time for locals to get their fair share of the new economy.
El pequeño pueblo apenas estamos operando y llegan otras personas que son de afuera y ellos se aprovechan de aquí en San Marcos. Entonces, primero tiene que superar San Marcos.
That's it for today. Thanks for joining us.